everyone. Welcome back to Otako'Clock.
We talking about boobs today.
Yup. Note the boob figure.
We have a recent addition to our props here.
Yeah, so today we're
As
going
he
to...
turns it to accentuate.
Yes. Anyway.
That was the point. Yes, I know.
All right, so today we're going to be talking about fan service.
In anime.
Yeah.
To qualify.
And this... As we're talking about fan service, I totally lost my train of thought there. As we're talking about fan service, we don't just mean the ecchi anime that everyone always thinks of when we say fan service, or the beach episodes. No, we're talking about all fan service. This includes, like, even kids anime has fan service, like
Pokemon.
Digimon. Yep. Doraemon, one of the most famous kids
all the
anime.
Mon ones. All
Yeah,
of them. You can't
all
trust
of
them.
All of them. Yeah. So every anime has
all,
fan service,
in
and
some
all of
degree.
them are used in a different fashion. So that's what we're going to be talking about today.
It's not necessarily about just fan service in anime, necessarily what the anime tries to do with that fan
It's
service.
the function
and why
of the
it's
fan
there.
service.
We'll
yeah.
have a different episode on what kinds of fan service there are at another
Yeah.
time.
Yeah,
But
there's a lot.
Mhm.
There's a lot.
So the first area of fan service we wanted to talk about is the Holy Light Divide. So this is
To
the one.
explain necessarily for that meaning. Yeah,
So
it's-
this is the type that you see in pretty much all of the anime, where it's the holy light shining down, or the clouds,
Steam clouds,
the smoke.
the bath water happens to be not transparent.
Yeah,
All of that.
sparkles sometimes, or, like
Pretty
stars.
much
Darkness.
anything
Yeah.
that is environmental that's covering up. Oh, even just like bushes. Bushes
Yeah.
work too. Pretty much anything that's environmental that covers up the fan service shot, so they aren't any more nude than I am right now,
Yeah.
but they are nude.
And this is used more functionally. I don't think, honestly, it's used to try and create sexuality, because it normally is so covering that it doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's like Fruits Basket, where
It is.
the function was that they were turning back from being an animal, so of course they wouldn't have their clothes.
Right. Yeah,
Well-
it's more to make continuity.
Yeah.
sense.
And you've
It's
also got a lot of the depressed bathroom contemplation scenes
Yeah,
where
where
somebody's
they're-
sighing into their bathwater because apparently
and,
that's a really big thing in
And
Japan.
like blowing bubbles and stuff
Yeah.
like that.
Yep, and a lot of animes do use it sexually. Like I could say, perhaps the most famous example is Sailor Moon.
Or
Like-
Sword Art Online.
Yeah, that's true. But mostly it's used for function over
It's
arousal.
the situation, you see it in a lot of bathhouse scenes, a lot of beach scenes, honestly, and that's pretty much in every anime.
Normally, it's normally dudes or old men. A lot of times, the
Yeah.
more common anime, and that's. God, I hope that's not meant for sexuality.
Yeah, right?
True. So the next divide that we wanted to talk about is the panty divide. So this
Which-
is going from what you see in all of the anime with completely covered by smoke or bushes or stuff like that, to actually showing stuff, but only showing the undergarments.
Yeah.
Stuff like you would see if you went to a beach with people with lots of especially skimpy bikinis,
Yeah.
basically.
And ESRB ratings, T rating.
Yeah.
We're
T rating PG-13, yeah, basically.
Yeah.
So it's like shows like Negima, where there's one particular scene in the very beginning where he sneezes and all of the he's a magician, for those who haven't seen Negima. And all of the skirts on the bus fly up and all of the girls' panties are exposed.
Yep.
And it's that sort of thing.
Or you've got ones where people come out of the bathwater, but they've got the really long, impossibly thick hair that happens to cover everything.
and not show any lines or curvature or stuff.
Yeah,
It's
they
just
have no wrinkles
or
because
free.
their hair,
Or
free because it's underwear.
Yep.
Or Armstrong from Full Metal Alchemists, that sort of stuff, where it's they're still there but they're covered. You don't see sexual organs in any way.
Does the one where Victor's naked in Yuri on Ice count as environmental holy light or
I haven't
panty
seen
line?
Yuri on Ice, and I'm proud of that.
You just your taste. Correct.
Nope.
It's
No.
not. It's nothing against.
I got nothing
First
on
off,
Yuri
it's
on Ice.
nothing.
It's
It's
not my
nothing
thing.
on Yuri on Ice. It's just it's one of those things as to more. I haven't
it's-
had a
it's a go-
time to
yeah.
go to.
And it's just not my kind of show.
It's not my kind of show, and there's nothing against LGBT relationships, nothing like that. I just, it's not my thing. I'm not a big fan of relationship and sports anime in general.
Yeah,
so.
for context, he watches a lot
Everything
of
from the 90s.
and a lot of horror anime. He loves the horror anime. So if Yuri on Ice was a horror anime, then he'd probably
I mean,
see it
actually,
first.
that's they will often do this kind of panty divide censoring
Yeah.
with blood.
Yeah.
True.
If it's a battle scene, they'll tear up all the clothes, but then
But-
their clothes are just replaced by crimson, impossibly deep
I
blood
don't
Yeah,
know if
so you
running
see-
all over their body.
And I don't know if anyone who writes these have ever been covered in blood, but you can still see
Yeah,
nipples
Well,
and body
it's
parts
the same
through
thing
blood.
with hair.
Blood's
you
not
can
that
see
thick.
things through hair.
No, that's not necessarily true. If you've got massive amounts of hair that's over you,
Sure.
that can
True.
cover nipple.
But I'm talking
risks.
about like,
Like
you've
a
got
chest
like,
carpet.
Yeah, really.
yeah.
Yeah, really.
Another one that's in this divide, even though they did technically show boobs, but they covered up the nipple, is Kill a Kill, which actually uses fan service in an interesting way.
Yes
it's
and no.
It's a little bit further than the normal panty divide manga or anime, but it's still not quite at the wholesale ecchi.
I think Kill la Kill, while trying to like lampoon shonen in general, I think it still uses it mostly to create arousal.
Yeah.
Because let's face it, a lot of the lampooning of shonen is at some point so, I don't want to say subtle because it really isn't.
Yeah, no.
But
So there's
they have their cake and eat it too. They want to make fun of shonens, but yet at the same time having
And
all the
ecchis,
elements. Yeah, but at the same time having all the elements that bring that crowd in anyway.
yeah. So like that's actually a big problem with subversions, which again will probably be another episode. The fact that to do a proper subversion, you have to use all the tropes, but if you use all the tropes, then it's not really subversion because the same people are going to get the same enjoyment out of it anyways.
To use subversion properly, I think the segue is nice into the next segment. Is to use subversion properly, you have to have like talent,
Yeah.
and an understanding of the genre. So like a
Like
good
One Punch Man.
One Punch Man, or for fan service, Berserk,
Yeah.
or Freezing.
You mentioned Perfect Blue as
Perfect
well.
Blue.
In the
Yeah.
List of because in these animes where they still use the same tropes that you would use in any other fan service or ecchi anime, it's used in a situation that is intended to make you intensely uncomfortable unless you're
Like,
a very messed up human being.
Which is the point.
Yeah,
Yes.
like for instance, the one that I really like that's in this genre, which we called basically the subversions of the ecchi, was Perfect Blue, which has all of these scenes where the main character is naked and in these really sexualized poses. However, the director manages to use the cinematography and use all of that, all of the language of film in such a way that it makes you intensely uncomfortable to watch it, let alone feel any sort of arousal for it. And so it's a purely uncomfortable, intense scene.
Same thing with Berserk. Specifically, they use rape several times in
Same with
Berserk.
Perfect Blue.
But there is one scene in particular, and if you've seen Berserk, I don't want to spoil it because
But you know exactly
you
what
know
scene it is.
exactly what scene I'm talking about, because it sort of is famous, especially in the original anime. It was adapted into an anime done perfectly. Where
The
there's
original manga?
no, it's adapted into an anime from the manga.
You said original anime and then you said original.
Well, I mean I
The
said
original series, not
Original
the one
series, yeah.
this year with the awful
Yeah,
CGI.
yeah.
And
Not
pan
yeah,
sound
yeah, with the
effect.
pan sound effect. But in this scene, Guts is watching someone that he cares about being raped graphically in front of him, and you see a lot. You see the top halves of these people, and you can tell very clearly what's going on. And you'll have her making a sexualized but pained expression, and then you'll have the other guy making a pleasurable expression. You're like, oh, that's, if you're kind of sick, you're like, oh, that's sort of hot. But then every time that happens, it cuts back to Guts ripping off his own arm to get to save her. And eventually he rips his own arm off, and you see the blood and the sinew and the bones popping. It's very graphic and very unpleasant. And if it doesn't cut to Guts, it cuts to these disgusting, like, Freudian distorted demons around him. And it punishes people that are trying to take arousal from that every single time. Like,
It's like you get a newspaper and you're slapping
exactly.
your dog. No,
it's
bad.
Like, it's like batting up a carrot when they go to reach for it, they shock their hand. And that's a good subversion, because it says, hey, look, here's this really creepy tentacle, almost, it's not tentacles, but it's frequently used with tentacles in normal anime, rape scene, where it's supposed to be like, oh, she's hot but enjoying it. No, that's not how it goes.
Yeah.
Rape is not okay, and I'm going to show you it by showing it to you. And, you know, that takes talent.
Yeah.
And Berserk is one of the only animes that does it. Well,
Perfectly.
Well,
Yeah.
no, that's I said one
There's
of
not
the
a
only.
ton.
There's
There's not
many.
a
There's
ton
not-
of subversions.
Well, there are a ton of subversions,
But they're
but they're
really-
not actually good subversions.
and-
Like, a lot of them you can find in the nipple divide.
Yeah,
in
yeah,
the really explicit content, a lot of them like to say that they're subversions because they use the tropes of an ecchi. They use the tropes of, like, the fighting girls where, like, one punch, all of their clothes, like, balloon off of their body and stuff like that.
claws that are exactly your layer of clothing. fit.
Yeah.
And so, like, there's a lot of them that say that they're subversion, but they're not. Like, there's one called Master of Martial Arts, which I honestly have not seen, but I've seen enough
I
reviews
haven't
of
seen it
to
either.
know that it is
Bad.
the worst thing out there. And they try to subvert by basically giving it a school days ending, where, like, it's just like a normal
Oh
fighting
wow!
girls
Look at all this
ecchi,
fan service,
and then
oh whoa, you got murdered for that.
yeah, and then
Yeah.
all
Sorry,
of the
Fred.
murder at the end, but it has none of the weight of something like Berserk or like Perfect Blue, and so it's just ecchi with a really disgusting and disappointing payoff.
It is, and you know, there's a lot of anime that try and say they're subversions, only as a cover to show more explicit
Yeah,
content.
and those are kind of like half-assing it basically.
Yeah.
That's kind of the problem with them. And just
mean,
to
they
kind
show
of
the
go
full
into this,
ass,
yeah, well,
but-
yeah, obviously,
Yeah.
but kind of to go into that, just because this thing happens a lot does not necessarily mean it can be bad.
Mm.
Like, there are shows that embrace the tropes and use them. They're like, yes, this is a show about fan service. Surprise, you know exactly what you came for when you rolled up to the
Exactly.
door.
Like,
Well, but I think we should talk about, in that case, the difference between a convention and a trope, because
Yeah.
there is a difference. Fan service and breast in anime can be a convention, but when it becomes a trope is when it's used to nauseam.
yeah.
When you use it so much to where this is getting in the way, like with High School of the Dead. In that case, it's a trope. It doesn't work. It doesn't make sense, and it detracts instead of adds.
Yeah.
Whereas something like, honestly, Negima uses fan service really well. He goes to an all-girls school, so it's going to happen, but it's not used to nauseam. Something like Monster Musume, on the other hand, the entire point of it is ecchi, and it kind of revels
It is
in
unapologetic about it, and that's what makes it work, because it's not trying to shove in something else and say, oh no, this is actually a show about blank.
Yeah,
Only
no.
there just happens to be lots of boobs.
No,
They're just like, no, this is a show about boobs.
Yeah, the plot is boobs.
Game of Thrones.
Exactly. Well, I mean,
I'm just
Well, no,
throwing
but-
shit at Game of
but-
Thrones. I know.
but
There's
Game
a
of-
lot more to it.
fine.
yeah, no. But Game of Thrones did coin the term sexposition.
Yeah, you're right. But
Where
sex plays
exposition with sex, because that's the only way to get audience members to listen to the exposition.
It is. But
Sexposition.
this sort of goes into our last topic we're going to cover is anime that are so reveled in ecchi and use such graphic ecchi to where it is basically porn.
It's
Yeah.
softcore. That's,
That-
that's
It
and,
is
and in the Blu-rays,
literal porn.
and in the Blu-rays it becomes literal porn.
Yeah.
Like what is it? Butler High.
I mean, technically, Monster Musume goes under this, but
Yeah,
Yeah,
well, but
it
it doesn't.
does.
and
But that it doesn't really go far.
yeah, well,
enough to
the
be
Oh.
key difference between
not really.
Have you seen some of the stuff from the DVDs?
True.
uncensored
Okay.
Monster Musume.
It is. There
Okay,
are
yeah, the
parts
uncensored
where
version.
there are parts
yeah.
where there are people like having sex where you, not in Monster Musume and other similar animes, where there are people that are having sex, but you just don't see penetration, but you see everything else.
Yeah.
It's what I would
Actually,
like to
a lot
call.
of the Monster Girl animes are in the literal porn section.
Yeah, it is.
Yes.
Like a good way I would equate these two is like HBO porn. Like if you have HBO, if you're a young buck like me, where your parents didn't watch you, if you stay until 3 or 4 a.m., stay up until 3 or 4 a.m. on HBO, you would see softcore porn, and it is effectively the same thing. You see everything but frontal bottom genitalia, and that's the way a lot of these anime are treated in their Blu-rays.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and the real big difference between these anime and other anime, even if they're super ecchi, is that these anime are specifically drawn this way and then censored for the on-air release to make them acceptable. Whereas the other ones were drawn to be acceptable in the first place.
So,
And then we'll have like an OVA cut that'll have that. Like,
Say,
Possibly.
for
yes.
instance, something like Fruits Basket was explicitly drawn to have the clouds go over. Even in the manga, they have the clouds going over everything.
there was no genitals
was-
ever drawn in
There
any
was
version.
there was no porn in any of it. However, something like, I don't know, give me an example.
High School DxD.
High School DxD was censored for the
I mean,
widespread
Love Ru.
release.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sekirei, Girls Bravo.
Yep.
Even
Love Hina.
Yeah, even the version of Rosario Vampire.
Oh,
Rosario
sure.
Vampire.
Now,
yeah.
just the anime. The manga actually had some fan service in the beginning, but shied away from it almost immediately.
Yeah, that's actually why I liked the manga.
It's good.
Yeah.
It's very good.
It's legitimately entertaining.
Yeah. But there's a lot of anime that's basically made just to be softcore porn for 15-year-olds in Japan. Let's be honest with it.
Or businessmen
Well,
on
then-
the trains.
Yeah, so
No,
and
then they just read real porn.
I know.
yeah, well, and then obviously at the very end of the scale you've got actual hentai, but
That's not
we're
really
not really here to
Yeah.
talk
That's a
about
different
that. Yeah.
genre.
Yeah, we're not really here to talk about that.
We
That's
will
where-
talk about it.
Are
but
we?
not
Will
today.
we? All right.
Well,
I guess
I-
we're
that
talking
is-
about that now that you've promised it.
No.
Well, I think
No,
there-
we're not talking about that
Good.
today.
Not today.
Not today.
Not today.
Yeah.
But I think there
But
is
today is not that day.
no, not no.
Nice.
We don't have the proper props anyway.
No. No. All right. That's
I
enough
think.
of this.
Yeah, I think we're gonna cut that there.
All
I
right.
think we're done here.
Yes, I hope that
Thanks,
was
Sam.
a little more interesting for you guys,
Nice.
talking about fan service there and actually talking about the different uses and stuff. So, see you guys next episode.
Peace.
Absolutely.
Bye.